Carlito's Way, I wrote it in longhand and so forth, because I don't type, I write everything in longhand. I wrote it in the first person, and I drew a composite of a lot of the guys that I grew up with, things I'd seen at first hand, because there's nothing fabricated in my novels. Somebody said what I quote, because I have an indelible memory for dialogue like that. And the events, some of them may appear fantastic, but they're mild compared to some of the things that I didn't even include. And I kind of put all that together in what I thought was a sort of a vehicle for film. First guy I was shown to was the editor-in-chief at Warner Books, was Howard Kaminsky, and he immediately saw its potential. He said, no, this has to be published as a hardcover vehicle, and then subsequently as a paperback vehicle with Warner Books. The critical reception was very good. The cinematic interest was almost immediate. I had a lot of, interest from producers and whatnot, and there were various options over the years. And then Marty Bregman put the thing together.
Many years ago, I got involved with Carlito's Way through a strange set of circumstances. Pacino came to me with a script based upon 2 books written by Eddie Torres, who's a criminal judge in New York. He said to me, Marty, he says, read this for me, and it was just terrible. Maybe one of the worst screenplays I've ever read, and I've read some real turkeys. I said, my opinion, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole, and I don't think any studio will. But Al, he liked the character. The character was a very well-defined character in the Torres books. There were 2 books based on the same character. I had read the books. Al asked me whether I would be interested in developing this into a movie. And that's how it started. I hired a writer who had worked with me before, David Koepp, and we were off to the races.
I was working on something for Marty Bregman, and he liked what I was doing, and so gave me the 2 Edwin Torres novels on which Carlito's Way is based, which are Carlito's Way and After Hours. Carlito's Way is the first, and After Hours is the sort of further adventures of Carlito Brigante. I loved them. The books were incredibly specific. The voice is so vivid and so there from the first page. The problem was that there was 800 pages of material and, how to find the movie in it. I also felt a certain amount of hesitation because, Spanish Harlem in the 1970s is not exactly my background, And I thought, I'm not sure where I get off writing about this. But then I realized, since the voice is there and the characters are there, and Torres is such a gregarious and willing author, and wanted to talk and help and guide in any way he could. So then when I realized my job was primarily going to be structural, and I would have all these assets, then I felt like I could do it.
The screenplay, as it evolved, a very excellent screenplay. The tilt was toward more After Hours because of the age factor. Carlito's Way takes Carlito Brigante from his teens into, let's say, his late 20s or early 30s. And then After Hours picks him up after that, after he's done a long stint in prison. So, of necessity, Pacino could not play him as an adolescent almost, and then as a very young man. So in essence, they elected to call the film Carlito's Way. But in fact, the screenplay is primarily based on After Hours.
After I had a screenplay written, then I went to De Palma. I thought Brian could add, certainly cinematically, the right tone to this. Brian is a very intelligent director. This was not an exploitive piece. He's one of our great directors. That's why I went to Brian.
Well, I was in Los Angeles, and my agent sent me the script, Carlito's Way. I didn't even want to read it. I didn't want to do another movie with Spanish-speaking gangsters. And he kept on saying, you've got to read the script, you've got to read the script. And I ultimately got convinced to read it, and it was only because I liked the script so much that I did it, because I did not want to return to this particular terrain again. I thought I'd done it in Scarface. As much as I liked working with Bregman and Pacino, it's a long, difficult struggle, but the script was so good that I said, I gotta make this, and that's what convinced me. I didn't find it that dissimilar, having spent a lot of time with Spanish gangsters. The sensibility is very similar, whether they're Cuban or Puerto Rican. What was different was Eddie Torres is a real guy.
I recollect going with him up to Spanish Harlem, to the barrio, and walking the streets with him and pointing out, you know. I mean, I'm a veteran of those streets. Just about every corner that I can tell you so-and-so got shot here, so-and-so got stabbed here. I mean, you know, this sort of thing.
We had Eddie Torres to follow and watch. And that's what I like about Spanish gangsters. You sort of have the Italian kind of warm feeling, familiar, religious thing going on. And then you got all the music. You have this great Latin music, which I don't think you have with the Italian gangsters. That's what makes it a whole different world for me.
I wrestled for a long time with whether or not to use this voiceover.
Somebody's pulling me close to the ground. I can sense, but I can't see.
Voiceover can be overused and it can be terrible. But in this case, I just didn't see any way to tell the story without it. So when I came on that idea, which is that the whole thing takes place in the second or two that Carlito is remembering right before he dies, that was when I felt like I really had a structure in which I could incorporate all the best material. Before Brian got involved, the voiceover took place in a hospital. And then Brian's idea was to move it to the train station where he'd almost, you know, it's such a romantic image. That's what I love about it. There's so much that echoes of the 40s filmmaking in this. Brian's idea was, which I loved, was that the whole movie takes place in a moment when the wheels of the stretcher get stuck in a crack in the floor. The whole movie's a recollection from right there.
It's a classic film noir concept. You know, the guy that gets shot at the beginning of the film recounting. Obviously, Sunset Boulevard is the prime example. I was trying to do it in a way that you would be brought back to the sequence and not realize you were in the death scene until it was too late.
The indictment is dismissed. The prisoner's discharged. Call the next case.
The name Brigante, it's a Corsican name. There was a whole lot of smuggling going on in Corsica, even before the dope trade. In the center of Puerto Rico, where my parents come from, there was a large in the 19th century immigration of Corsicans. So that's where I got the idea that he was of that origin.
I'm retired.
Carlito Brigante is kind of a composite of a lot of guys I grew up with. And it's autobiographical too. Some of the earlier episodes in the book, of a non-criminal nature, I might add, are me. Most of it is from the guys that I grew up with. And there are a lot of guys in Harlem, those that are left, who claim they are the prototype for Carlito Brigante. But I always dismiss them. I say, you too ugly. He was a good-looking guy. Or you never made any money. Or you never killed nobody, you know, that sort of thing. But he's really a composite of several guys. 3 in particular. But, you know, to protect the guilty, I'm not going to give names.
I'll tell you what, I'll hug her later. Okay? All right. I just got to get through this shot.
Pacino is a fascinating actor. No matter what he does on screen, audiences like him. I mean, there's a warmth that he has, there's a vulnerability that he has as an actor and also as a man, which comes through.
We're done. Tomorrow I'm going to bring my shirt and sign my undershirt.
Absolutely.
Working with him has always been an experience. First of all, he's a close friend. Secondly, he's one of the great actors, maybe in the past 20, 30 years. And when you know somebody as well as I know him, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier to communicate. It makes it a lot easier to fight, to argue about things. And we argue a lot. But we've made some pretty good movies together.
This was a lot easier than Scarface, because Al knew me very well now. He was very comfortable with me. There were only a few things I think we got disagreements over, some lines he wanted to do differently. But we basically were like two old warriors going up the hill again. I mean, we had been there. We had made a lot of movies since we had made Scarface. We were very familiar with each other's style and way of working. And one of the things I was always happy I was able to do with Pacino was to show how beautifully he moves. He has incredible, beautiful movements, and just to watch him move and to be able to shoot him move and to show the audience the beauty of his movements was quite fulfilling. And Al began to realize in Scarface that I was shooting in a way that no other director had. And he realizes that I have a kind of particular visual point of view that underscores what he does. And by the time I got to Carlito's Way, he just was very comfortable with what I was doing.
You heard of Carlito, right? Oh, well, what you need him for?
Tranquilo. Just come along for the ride, man.
The language is the language of the street. A lot of that slang or street language in the barrio comes in large measure from the black community because we're very adjacent to one another. We all went to school together, and we picked up a lot of their inflections.
Sasso, man. That's Sasso.
And that's what I told Pacino when we shot the film. You're playing a Puerto Rican, but you, in effect, talk like a black street guy, because that's what we spoke like in large measure.
They shotgun you, man, just to see you fly up in the air, Chacho. You better off in jail.
In my first draft, there's one character in particular, Pachanga, who really uses heavy slang. And when we got to the first read-through, somebody took me aside and said, you know, there's a lot of rumbling among the, the Latino members of the cast that's really offensive the way you wrote that shit. And I said, no kidding, I didn't mean it to be. So I went and just changed it all and wrote it in standard English and then just have the actor do a heavier accent, which is always the best thing anyway.
Carlito, the guy got a lot of money, man. He got safe in the office with stacks of hundreds just went
Hey! Kleinfeld is my brother. Look at me.
Kleinfeld. He is a composite of lawyers, criminal lawyers that I've met over the years.
He's a fucking cokehead, Charlie.
Kleinfeld was a phenomenon that I've observed at firsthand, where a guy, an attorney, he gets sucked into this environment, becomes immersed or roped in with these bad guys because they can be very fascinating and seductive almost. You see, the lifestyle, the women, the money, in this instance, the cocaine as well. But then he violates a principle that Carlito espouses from an old Spanish aphorism. He would say, juntos, pero no revueltos, which means together, but not mixed up. And that was Kleinfeld's downfall. He got mixed up.
I'm so fucking shook up. I cannot see straight.
That's an offshoot of more than one instance of attorneys whom I have known who became involved with their clients. I know 3 that were killed, personally.
Sean Penn is an amazing actor. I don't believe anybody told him what to look like. I think Sean had a concept in mind, and he brought to his character an enormous amount of talent. I mean, he was exquisite.
He went home and sort of shaved his head. Came back with this curled, receding hairline look, and we went, oh my God, what have you done? He just likes to look completely different from role to role, and their whole character came with this sort of receding hairline, frizzy hairdo that he did.
And then all the myriad of great performance, because that film produced a lot of guys who went on. But you got Viggo Mortensen, he played Lalin. Certainly my protege, as I call him, Luis Guzman. He's all over the place.
Ain't no hard feelings, Carlito.
Leguizamo, that's probably one of the best portrayals, because his character, Benny Blanco from the Bronx, is an unforgettable character. I've gone to other cities. People will approach me and say, I'm Benny Blanco from the Bronx, I like to juxtapose the contrasting characters, because I've seen that myself at first hand. Here you have a rough, tough hoodlum Puerto Rican from the neighborhood, and here you have this quintessential, let's say, waspy type girl, but from the Midwest, but she's got a social agenda. Even though they may appear disparate at the outset, in fact, they mesh very well. She sees him perhaps almost as a sociological project almost. She's gonna save him, you see.
You said you wouldn't break my heart, Charlie.
The whole girl thing was very difficult. We looked at everybody. We had a big problem. Of course, she had to do a striptease. This was the mid-90s, this kind of nudity stuff you did.